Hi, everyone. Today we have John Woods from Algorand Foundation. He's the CTO at the Algorand Foundation. How are you today, John?
Good, Darren. Thanks for having me on. Excited to be here.
Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. So can you tell us just a bit of background about yourself and how you got into crypto?
I'm John. I'm the CTO, as you mentioned, at the Algorand Foundation. And so I'm responsible for all things tech at the foundation. And so I effectively set the strategy for technological endeavors across the entire org. So that can be anything from working with our leaders in DevRel to make sure that there's a good developer relations experience. So when people are building on Algorand or using our technologies, that they get their questions answered, all the way to managing the research team and everything in between. So that's kind of the scope of my work at the foundation. Specifically, I'm responsible for, I guess, the ecosystem and the community, rather than our sister company, the Algorand Inc., whose responsibility really focuses on the engineering of the protocol itself. So they are day-to-day writing the code. We are day-to-day trying to make sure that the ecosystem is an attractive place to build and to spend time. My background is, I guess, varied. I've worked in banking and I've worked in engineering. And I guess notably in terms of crypto roles, I was the lead architect on Cardano, and I led applied cryptography there. Same with consensus on Ethereum. I was a senior architect and led applied cryptography there. And so my background really is, software engineering, software programming, progressing then into being an architect, who's someone who really, I guess, designs systems more than actually writes the code directly. And also always doing so, though, with an eye on security and privacy. So a big part of my experience would be around the use of cryptographic protocols and cryptographic primitives to build complex or more sophisticated and more secure systems. That's kind of my core background. And the first time I ever touched on, cryptocurrency in general was around 2012 or so, maybe a little bit earlier, when I heard about Bitcoin. A friend was talking to me about it, and I was running a node on my MacBook. The Bitcoin blockchain was probably 30 gigs or something at the time, or a little bit less. It was like still big for the day, but it wasn't enormous. And yeah, just playing with the idea of digital scarcity, trying to understand what happens if I cloned my keys. Do I get twice my coins and stuff like that? I mean, really stupid things now when you look back on it. But I was just playing with sitting in my apartment that I rented, playing with the Bitcoin blockchain and basic kind of GTK wallet back in 2011.
Awesome. So there's a lot of projects that kind of solve the blockchain trilemma. What attracted you to Algorand versus going to another scalable chain that's doing a good job at trying to solve that problem?
So I think actually there's kind of a number of projects within the decentralized asset space or the crypto space that have done a pretty great job at their engineering and a pretty great job at building out a product that is interesting and progresses the technology in general. And so, Cardano was a great place to work. Ethereum, working on Ethereum with consensus was a great experience too. And both of those projects are very credible, and they have wonderfully talented people working on them. And I think they will probably go on to be very successful. I guess what attracted me to Algorand was that I felt, when I was assessing the technical landscape, doing the interview process, etc., and I was kind of doing a deep dive, because you don't really go extremely deep on a cryptocurrency until A, you're working on it or for it, and B, unless you're heavily invested in it. So at that point, I hadn't been working or invested deeply in Algo, so I hadn't spent a lot of time looking at the technology. I'd heard it was a contender. I knew that there was, of course, a lot of smart people working there, including Silvio Micali, who's the founder, who's a Turing award-winning computer scientist. So I had lots of smart people working on it, but I hadn't really looked deep. And during that interview process, I kind of dived into, well, how does this thing work? And opened up the GitHub, tried to understand the components that were within the system, tried to understand the heart of the smart contract execution, which is the AVM, the Algorand virtual machine. Looked at the various languages that you express smart contracts in, so Teal and PyTeal at the time. Looked at how expressive they were, looked at the speed of execution of the platform in terms of smart contracts and the resources that are afforded to those contracts at runtime, but also in terms of the data propagation. How does data traverse the network path and the critical path? during the execution of consensus and during the process of adding new blocks to the chain. And so looked at all of these parts, from network to the ledger to the consensus to the smart contract platform, and I was just blown away by the elegance of the design and by the quality of the engineering. And I think what's interesting is that the question I had for myself at the end, the kind of my thought could be reduced to, why haven't I heard about this thing before? Why wasn't this on my radar? Because everyone knows about XRP, everyone knows about Cardano, everyone knows about the kind of Big 10 or whatever, right? But there's a lot of kind of projects that are outside of that bracket that are really doing things that maybe make them deserve to be in that kind of like more prominent bracket. So yeah, I guess when I seen the properties that Algorand had, so the things I've just described, plus layering on top of that they've managed to achieve those things with the engineering that they've done, whilst also having no downtime, which means it's highly robust, it's highly reliable. Doing so in a way that scales out to tens of thousands of transactions a second, which is where it's at right now, and indeed doing so in a secure way where it's never been defrauded or had any incidents in terms of security. That is a powerful story, and the opportunity to move from Cardano, where I was basically head of engineering, if you like, responsible for the core node from an architecture and engineering point of view. So it's a senior job that I very much appreciated. But moving from there to a role where I was the CTO, so the chief of technology at a foundation, that I felt like I could take this Algorand product, take the engineering behind it, and drive it forward in terms of people's awareness of it and people's adoption of it. I thought that was a challenge that was exciting, and one I wanted to be part of. I wanted to be part of the story of taking Silvio's baby, taking the work that these people have done, and just highlighting it the same way I did for Cardano when I was working there.
So I often see a lot of wars happening on Twitter over the double spend problem. I think that's the end all be all with blockchains. Do you agree with that? Do you think there's like is that like a critical component of this, or is Twitter making a really big deal about something that's kind of not as big as they're making it into? I mean, a lot of people just the proof of work mining, that's the only way to be decentralized. So I just want to hear your thoughts on that. Yeah,
so just even more abstractly, Twitter is a hellhole of argument across, of course, a lot more than just crypto stuff. But yeah, I mean, I'm in it every day, right? So I kind of see the constant arguments and bickering. And in many cases, a lot of folks are arguing about things that they don't truly fundamentally understand, whether that's the cryptography or indeed the distributed system properties or whatever. Of course, I've got a lot of thoughts on this. I think there's different lenses with which you can view decentralization, and I think that's an intellectually honest thing to say, because, like, yes, at something's core, decentralized means that there's no party who can control or have majority control over the properties of a system. And so proof of work, by the way, which I don't dislike, a lot of my biggest holdings in cryptocurrency are proof of work chains, and so I don't have a problem with proof of work personally. I appreciate that it's not as efficient as proof of stake, and Algorand is a wonderfully efficient at a power level proof of stake chain. So I think there's space for both, and both have benefits and drawbacks. I don't think there's any absolute winners. It's much like everything in life. A sports car is sexy and it looks good and it's great, but it's maybe not as comfortable and doesn't hold all your luggage. And there's always trade-offs in engineering, and that's true of every product that we use, whether it's a knife in your kitchen, where they've had to decide, the materials for the handle are going to be quite cheap because it's a domestic knife and you don't want to have to pay $200 for a knife, or whether that's the laptop that you're typing on. They make concessions around the number of presses a key can take, and how many hours of light the screen can produce, and so on. And so you'll see when you build distributed systems, those trade-offs are in some cases quite complex, but you're always trading off decentralization for security, against, you know, how robust the system's going to be, against how much it's going to cost to engineer and maintain. And there's all these kind of dials, and, you know, you move one knob over here and another one moves down. You move that knob back up and maybe this one starts moving down. And so, you know, it's about striking the right balance. And coming back to the kind of lenses on decentralization, you know, a few of these will be things like, yes, you know, how decentralized is the consensus mechanism broadly? You know, the act of putting transactions, validating transactions, ensuring there's no double spend, putting them into a block, making them immutable, and you know, tying a bow around it. Who's responsible for that, and how many entities control it? Is it like two guys in their bedroom with an ASIC, or is it like you know, thousands of participants that have to agree? So that's one lens. The second lens, I think, that doesn't really apply to proof of work because it kind of emits these coins over time and drips them across the people who create the blocks. So it naturally tends to be somewhat more decentralized. But with proof of stake, of course, another lens is, what is the distribution of the coins? Are they owned by foundations? Are they owned by early investors? Are they owned by big VC companies, etc.? Does BlackRock own half your coin distribution? And that's another lens you can have. Then, you know, you can also say, well, what about pool mining? So Algorand doesn't have this concept of pool block production. So Cardano uses delegated proof of stake. Ethereum now uses proof of stake. Bitcoin uses proof of work. Monero uses proof of work. And most of these coins will allow people to come together in a pool. And effectively, a pool can be seen as kind of a single entity. So one might say that although there's many, many people who form the pool of say, Bitcoin miners and pool or whatever, you know, you could see that pool as a single entity. And so if you look through that lens, you know, there's probably only a couple of entities that control the majority of the Bitcoin hash rate because there's only a couple of pools that contribute to it. But of course, functionally, it's quite decentralized, but that's, you know, another lens. And it goes on and on. You know, one last one is like the data propagation layer. When a block is produced and it's being broadcast to all of the nodes in the network, in this decentralized network, they all have to get the new block and add it to their copy of the blockchain. And that's the case across nearly all cryptocurrencies. How does that happen? You know, are there any gatekeepers that kind of block certain, that would stop a certain block if it contains certain transaction types? And you know, is there centralization around the connectivity paths within the network, or are they quite free, open roads? You know, and so yeah, loads of different ways to kind of view it. And so, just in summary, I would say, I don't build the protocol anymore because, you know, what I'm doing at the foundation is not working directly on the protocol itself, although I do speak to the guys who engineer the protocol all the time and give my feedback and thoughts when they ask me. But from my experience, when I did work on protocol level engineering for Cardano and other chains, I would say that it's very important to strike the right balance. And you're trying to make sure that you're delivering a product that adheres to the fundamental value proposition of what we're trying to do with blockchain, which is be self-sovereign, i.e. you own your coins, not the bank or someone else. Be decentralized, i.e. that this system is not one that someone can just turn off. Be secure for obvious reasons, and then be permissionless and censorship resistant. So be a technology that can't be stopped just because someone doesn't like what gender you are or what country you're from or what your religion is, you know, and these are the kind of the reasons that blockchain and crypto sprung up to kind of to take the power back a little bit to the people. And so when you're making your trade-offs about like how fast your blockchain is versus how decentralized it is versus how well your coins are distributed, you know, and you're sliding these little knobs I talked about at the start, you got to make sure that whatever formation they're in at the end, or certainly as you're developing forward and as you're evolving, you got to make sure that they're true to these value propositions. And so that you don't set up your knobs in a way that you're not that you're violating one of these principles, because I think then you've lost the reason for doing it in the first place. So at Algorand, and of course at many other quality projects, we're solving for a system which is permissionless, decentralized, self-sovereign, whilst trying to make sure it's as fast, as robust, and as secure as possible. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. My comment though is a lot of people are like misinformed where they think that the actual miners are decentralizing the network, but it really comes down to the node operators, right? It's the node operators that kind of figure out what direction Bitcoin's going, and they vote yes or no on any changes. And you know, that to me it seems more like what decentralization is, would be the node operators, yet it's always focused on the mining. And their criticisms usually come around proof of stake. Even the guys at Ripple, their idea of oh, well, proof of stake, it's the richest that get to govern the network, right? They have the biggest say. But proof of stake has mechanisms to stop that, right? Like there's randomizers involved. It's not exactly cut out like that. And Algorand is pure proof of stake. Can you just kind of talk about that?
Yeah, but by the way, you know, what you said is absolutely true. I think it's a very interesting point. And you described Bitcoin there just, you know, very briefly, saying, you know, well, there's nodes and how the software they run collectively and the path they choose to vote on becomes the canonical version of Bitcoin. And as you quite rightly point out, it used to be the case that you would mine on your node. You know, you'd solo mine if you like. So you'd be running a node and mining at the same time. But now it's a little bit divorced, right? As you just pointed out, you got the pool miners and then you got the guys who run the nodes. And so you're right. There's kind of a symbiotic relationship there where they kind of have to work together. But you know, if the miners stop working, the transactions stop getting processed. If the nodes vote in a certain way, then they'll go off and do their own thing in a different way. Algorand actually, this kind of feeds in nicely to what one of Algorand's kind of differentiators, which is, yeah, it uses this technology we call pure proof of stake. And the pure bit, so it's still proof of stake, i.e. you stake your coins, and by staking your coins, you're allowed to participate in consensus, which means validating transactions and putting them into a block. And we have, you know, an assumption within the network that a certain threshold of the stake is being honest, of course, as most proof of stake networks are. But the pure bit is basically the idea that nodes that are participating in consensus, you know, the operation of a node and the act of staking or block production, we call it, but effectively mining is the same thing, are not divorced from each other. And so we don't have these folks who are out kind of staking on their own, or, you know, block producing on their own and mining on their own in some pool whilst other folks run nodes. We don't have that separation that you just described in Bitcoin. And instead, the pure part is that actually everyone running a node is capable of staking, you know, a handful of algo, like 2, 3, 5 algo, like nothing, right? With cents worth of algo, you're allowed, or you know, there's complete freedom to participate within the consensus algorithm. And so, of course, the more algo you have, which is the coin of Algorand, the more probability you have, you know, in terms of mathematical statistical probability of being selected to create a block or validate a block, etc. But it is completely open, and the only way to stake your algo is by running a node. So we require folks to run a node in order to participate in this staking activity. So this is kind of the pure bit. It's pure in the sense that Algorand's technology topology, so its network topology and its technology stack, encourages one to run a node, and you produce blocks by running a node, and the act of producing blocks or minting blocks or mining them, and the act of running a node are not divorced from each other as they are in other cryptocurrencies. And that's probably the simplest way to put it. And so the idea is that this will lead to a more decentralized, more egalitarian network topology or network distribution.
So a lot of financial data is private information, right? And part of the beauty of crypto, right, is that there are these transparent ledgers. Do you think at one point there'll be an opportunity to put private data on transparent ledgers, where it's kind of a mix of, you know, not necessarily the siloed private networks, but they're actually on chain, but still keep people's privacy?
Yeah, and so this is really a question that is abstract. You know, it can be abstracted away from any particular cryptocurrency, and I think it's a really important question, Darren. It's like we all have expectations of privacy. I mean, you know, I can see, you know, in your house, I can see probably there, you know, you've got blinds because I can see the lines on your wall with the light. Same in my room, I've got blinds over there. And we expect to be able to close our blinds when we're getting dressed or when we want privacy, or close our doors, and so. People expect privacy in everything. You expect privacy when you're text messaging someone, when you're sending an iMessage or using WhatsApp or Signal. And so why wouldn't people want privacy with their financial transactions? And of course we do. And we expect that people can't just peer into our bank accounts to see what we spend our money on. And so I very much, you know, from a personal point of view, separate to any work I'm doing with Algorand, I very much deeply feel that privacy is an important human right. It may not be the most important human right. Certainly, food and shelter and whatever would come first, but it's an important aspect of being human, having that right to privacy. So I think it's fundamentally important for us to add privacy to blockchains generally, if they're going to be widely used for the types of things that they're used for. Now, there's different kinds of approaches on this. You don't have to make the whole chain private at a very, very simple level. What one could do is, of course, use the blockchains to store encrypted information. So I could agree with you, a key using one of the many key agreement schemes, but as an example, we could, if we were both users on Algorand, we could take our key pairs and we could do a kind of an elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman key exchange where we would kind of marry our public and private keys together, and we would be able to agree a symmetric key, a password that we could use then to then encrypt data and put it on chain. It may not be the most elegant thing you could do, but it would be a way to use the blockchain to store private data. And blockchains have been used to store encrypted data before. But maybe that certainly doesn't solve, for financial privacy in terms of what you're spending and the movement of funds on the chain. That's just storing private data on the chain. And so there's a number of different technologies that are kind of, I guess, evolving at the moment. People will be aware of zero knowledge proofs. And in fact, Silvio, who's the gentleman who founded Algorand, he is one of the co-founders of zero knowledge proofs that, from a fundamental cryptographic primitive point of view. And so we can use these zero knowledge systems, and notable examples are technologies like Monero, which is a private cryptocurrency, which I'm quite a fan of. Zcash is another one. Secret Network. There's many different attempts to do this, but I do think it's important, and I think at some point it will be important to bring those technologies to Ripple, Algorand, and other cryptocurrencies that are prominent out there, because I think people do need privacy. The problem, of course, tends to be going back to this kind of like move one knob over here and something else changes. When you add privacy, things do get more computationally expensive. The blockchains tend to be more bloated because private transactions are larger in terms of bytes than non-private transactions, generally speaking. And so, yeah, you end up with this extra complexity in terms of your engineering.
Yeah, I used to make videos kind of about the CBDC surveillance state that's coming, and I started working with the blockchain, the XX network, and that's David Chom was a co-architect in the XX network. But I've really, I feel strongly about this and really dedicating a lot of time and energy to make sure that we do have privacy and we can combat something like that. So is there any real world use cases that you can currently talk about that are using the Algorand ecosystem?
Yeah, certainly. So and by the way, just on your point, I do think I'm sure whatever CBDC is eventually issued, and I do think one will be issued. I mean, obviously I don't work in finance anymore, but my view would be that I have worked in central banking, and one of the things they do when you join a central bank is explain the whole process of the bank and all the things that they do. Now, I was working in tech there, but they bring you in and they induct you and explain how things work within central banks. And there's an enormous cost to just rotating the notes in the euro system. So are you probably in the UK? Are you? I guess.
No, I'm in the United States.
You're in the United States, okay. So but in the UK and Ireland, and around Europe, the notes they have a certain lifetime, and then after a certain number of years they're destroyed, and then they have to be destroyed securely, and then they have to be reminted. And the same with the coins, and there's the logistics and the security around it, and that's just cash, never mind all the cost of kind of doing digital version of cash, right? And so I do think at some point we'll see some kind of more formal digital currency come out, and you are right. I think that there are concerns there, because when things are purely digital, and there is no more cash, and I do think that we'll probably be in a cashless society. Some societies are already very close to cashless, but we will see, I think within the next kind of 10, 15 years, we'll probably see a big push away from cash. It'll be, you can already go into stores in Ireland and they'll say, we only take card. They want you to tap for your coffee or whatever. And so I think it is a big consideration, because I think, again, it's like, is it great if every penny I spend is tracked by someone, and they know how much chocolate I eat and how much beer I drink? And I don't think it is a great thing. And again, it comes back to privacy. So yeah, I think it's it's really quite an interesting space. In terms of the use cases for the real world adoption use cases for Algorand, I mean, there's a whole bunch of them outside of the. I mean, every blockchain has its kind of meme coins and its art and NFTs and collectibles and the kind of the swaps and the decentralized finance that you usually see, being quite popular with folks. But leaving that stuff aside and saying, well, that's nice, but it's maybe not as impactful. If you want to talk about the kind of more impactful real world adoption, maybe I'll call out a few. We have one that I'm particularly quite fond of is called Hesab Pay, and the idea there is that within Afghanistan, there are certain parts of the country, as I understand it from the team that are working out there, where women are quite disadvantaged in terms of their ability. Certain women are disadvantaged in terms of their ability to own bank accounts and have their own money. And so there's quite really an asymmetric kind of power out in some of those places. And so what the team did out there was they produced a digital version of the Afghani, the local Afghan currency, and they specifically targeted for women, right? So what they've released like a mobile phone app for Android, iPhone, and other phones, which allows you to effectively have this digital version of the Afghani in a discrete way, where women can have access to funds in a way that's secure, controlled, and I think discreet. And this digital Afghan currency is actually accepted in tens of thousands of stores across Afghanistan. And so that I think the idea is cool, but usually what happens is, it's only accepted in like 4 places, and that's not. I mean, it's not very good. But in this particular instance, they've managed to really roll out a kind of a network across the country where people can go and use this. And so that is a real story of, like, there are transactions right now on Algorand that are contributing to the financial freedom of women in a oppressed region, and so that's a powerful thing. Maybe moving from that to something a little less impacty, but also important, is TravelX. We have this company called TravelX that built on the chain, and what they've basically done is they've done a few different things, and so they use the chain in terms of like trying to build out coherent stats around airport shopping and reward systems for airport shopping and stuff like that. But maybe more exciting for me is the idea of ticket sales. So this idea that if you bought a plane ticket somewhere and you can't go anymore, wouldn't it be great if you could sell that ticket onto a third party in a way that the veracity of the sale was ensured? You don't want to be buying a ticket and not sure whether or not it's legit. And also the airlines also have security issues, so they want to make sure that like whoever's being sold a ticket is okay to be sold a ticket. So they're using the chain to connect those dots and to be able to enable secondary markets for plane ticket sales. And again, this is really quite a powerful thing. I would love to see that kind of move forward and also disintermediate things like Ticketmaster. I go to see bands fairly regularly, and what's really annoying is this idea that you just get absolutely scalped on the price with Ticketmaster. I'm sure you have it in the US as well. And so it's, being able to kind of disintermediate Ticketmaster and kill their monopoly will be a really great thing. So there's a number of kind of examples of apps like that on the chain that are maybe a bit more impactful than the kind of the usual DeFi stuff that folks would be interested in. But I think ultimately, if you look at technologies like Algorand, it's effectively a decentralized operating system, and just like the Mac or Mac OS or Windows. And yeah, there's some trivial things that are games and stuff like that, but there's also some very important software that's run on these networks now. And I think if cryptocurrencies are going where I think they're going, which is to become decentralized networks of value, which enable financial freedom globally, then I think we will see more and more of this stuff come. And I think that's quite an exciting prospect.
Yeah, I've seen quite a few different projects utilizing the whole idea of the ticket, but not only taking the used ticket, but making it into like some type of artistic thing that happened at the event, and then you have a collectible market that you can sell your old tickets. Some of those Broadway tickets, from 1980 something, like, are worth something today on eBay. You could sell used tickets. It's like, if that had an artistic component to it, and maybe just like a highlight from the event that you attended, and kind of raffle off like really good ones to really I don't know, to some people, and make it more unique. I think that opens up opportunities that are really massive in the collectible world.
Totally. And one other one I'll just give you, right, just popped into my head. It's my actual favorite one. I don't know why I didn't think of it first. There's this company called book.io. I love their domain name as well, like book.io, 4-letter domain name. It's great. And their whole concept is effectively a decentralized version of Amazon Books. You take a book on your Kindle. What you're really doing is you got your Kindle device, which is a pretty good device. I've got one. But the problem is you don't actually own the book. What you really own is a digital license for the book. And then you get a new Kindle and you sign in. It talks to its servers and it pulls down the text. It's fine. It's good. It's enabled books. It's enabled you to carry hundreds of books on a holiday. I'm not saying it's a bad product. It's not a bad product. But the problem is with it is that if Amazon goes away, you're going to lose all your books too. So what book.io have done is created, we talked about the principles of blockchain earlier on. The self-sovereignty is an important one. Well, we usually think of self-sovereignty as in control of our money. The same way when you have keys on Ripple, they are your coins, they're your XRP, and you're able to do what you want with them. That's an important concept. But what they've done, they've applied that concept not just to the funds, but in this case, but to the books. And so when you buy a book through book.io, and they have an iPhone app as well, just like your Kindle app, you're actually buying an actual copy of the book digitally. So you buy effectively, you own an encrypted copy of the book that's stored in IPFS at the moment, but it will be stored potentially on the Algorand blockchain later on. They've launched on a number of chains, Cardano included. But the user experience in Algorand, because of its fast finality, as in when a transaction is in a block, the first block it's in, it's kind of done. There's no confirmations. Because of the fact that it's got a fast block time as well as the finality. And because of the cost of using the chain is quite low, as it is with Ripple and as it is with Cardano, you end up in a situation where like the actual user experience is really good. So when you buy an app through book.io, you get your encrypted copy of the book. It's available near instantly. So within seconds, you can download that book and you have a copy that's assigned to you in decentralized storage forevermore. And so as long as these decentralized networks live, so does your copy of the book. And that's a powerful thing. Because what we've done there is we've taken effectively the model that Amazon had, which is really the accessibility of books globally, and we've added to that level of accessibility a decentralization in terms of the fact that you own it yourself and it can't be taken away from you. And also one more important thing, which is one of these other virtues I talked about was censorship resistance. And sometimes it's a hard one to say, it's a hard one to define sometimes, but in this instance, it's quite simple. You can now access books that have been banned in certain countries through book.io. So you can read a copy of Mein Kampf, even if you're in a country that doesn't allow it, or you can read a copy of one of this dystopian novels that are banned in many countries, like Animal Farm or George Orwell or whatever. And so that's a powerful thing. And I'm quite proud as well to have it on the chain, because I think it's an example of where blockchain has enabled something cool.
Yeah, you brought up transaction finality, and this is a community question. They wanted to know the specifics of transaction finality. There was talk about comparing to other chains like Solana and AVAX, but do you know the specifics of the transaction finality on Algorand?
As in how it happens?
Well, the time.
Oh yes, yeah. No, I do. Yeah, I absolutely do. So it's at 3.2 second average at the moment. Okay. Yeah, and so here's an interesting thing. Most blockchains like Bitcoin, I don't know if you've recently sent Bitcoin, but you're usually kind of 45-minute wait, okay, before you get your confirmations. On Cardano, it's like 5 minutes maybe to get your confirmations. How long does it take on Ripple for confirmations? I'm not actually sure.
It's like 3 seconds, 4 seconds, but I don't know if that's finality or like when you see the coin in your actual wallet. It's in a couple of seconds. It's not.
Right. Okay, yeah, perfect. But actually, so yeah, that's quite fast. But if you take Cardano, say somewhere in the middle of the pack, say kind of a couple of minutes. Let's say you take 2 minutes. You'll see it in your wallet, as you say. You'll see that you've received the coins. But actually, you could have a reorg. You can have this like block reorg where sometimes you have these short forks in cryptocurrencies where they'll kind of like pop back a few blocks and maybe and you'll have to resend your transaction. So I don't know if your viewers will have seen this, but like you kind of new block, and all of a sudden there's 2 blocks produced at the same time. And so you've got these kind of competing mini chains for kind of a few minutes. And so let's say you progress them. If you're on the wrong side of history here and you're on the kind of wrong mini chain, if this one gets a bit longer and wins out, you end up at a situation where your transaction is reversed, and now this is the source of truth. And so this happens on Ethereum, Bitcoin, and others. And what people do is that they just replay the transaction, you just send the transaction again. And this is normal, but one of the great differentiators of Algorand is, as well as this kind of speed of blocks. So you're only waiting, as you described it with Ripple, a few seconds to see the coins in your wallet. The great bit, on top of the fact that you've now got your coins, is that there are no block reorgs. And so with Algorand, effectively, the consensus mechanism agrees 100% of the network agrees on every block every time. And so there's never this kind of like popping of blocks. And so what this means is that you have this one block finality time. So it takes, once the transaction's in a block, it's final. And this is quite a powerful thing. When you're buying books, as an example, what you don't find is that maybe I'll buy a book sometimes and then I lose the book because the transaction was reversed. And so that's not a great experience. So with Algorand, once you see the book in your library, you can assume that it won't be taken away. So yeah, it's quite a powerful technology.
You mentioned censorship with books, but what about like universal norms, something that breaks like a universal norm that, you really don't want, right? So this technology gives the freedom to do whatever, but still we're people that make up these protocols, right? And there's certain topics, subjects that just are not acceptable to the vast majority of people in the world. I mean, I'm personally thinking about this from with the privacy at XX network. It's like that would have to happen at the consensus level. Is that the same with Algorand? If something like that were to happen, the consensus level would have to.
Yeah, so absolutely. So by the way, I agree. Just because we have these technologies doesn't mean they should be, used for just anything. And so I think, the broader point is important. I hear this. I've regularly heard from people, well, privacy is only kind of really important if you're not hiding something. And that's kind of a common trope that I would hear. And so see, I disagree with that, because there are many examples of where privacy, I think, both in blockchain context and otherwise, are important where you may not be doing anything wrong broadly in society's view of life, but maybe in your local area, it is considered, a problem. As an example, buying a religious text in certain countries can be something that can be a penalty of death. I would say that, most folks in the United States and across Europe would say that that's an overreaction. If someone buys a Bible or a Quran or something, it's not appropriate to kill them. But there are countries where that happens. And so, there's plenty of reasons anyway for that privacy is important. I think as well, I always think back to the example of, cars and vans and knives and guns are all weapons effectively, right? And you can use it. If you drive a car into a crowded place, you can hurt people. And of course we control guns as I think we probably should. But we don't really control the sale of knives. You got to be maybe over 16 to buy one in most places, but that's about it. And similarly with cars, we give kids cars by the time they're 16, usually in Ireland, and I think as well in the United States. And so, I think it's just one of these things. I think you got to be careful with the application of technology. I think you gotta have oversight. We still need laws in place. It's not a kind of a Wild West free for all. But all that said, if someone is using these technologies to commit crimes or to do or commit heinous acts, they should be prosecuted, of course, to the full extent of the law. But at the same time, because these technologies, just like the internet itself, bring good and bad, the internet has enabled an enormous change in communication and world trade. But of course, it is also used for things that are illicit. But ultimately, it's important that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, and that we use these technologies for all of the good that they can bring, whilst doing our best to ensure that the law is upheld. And yeah, just more specifically with Algorand, consensus has to be voted in. We also have a governance kind of process where people can vote on things, but ultimately, if there was a change in consensus in terms of the rules, which happened quite recently with our upgrade, that effectively was a consensus change when we moved to the faster block time. That's voted in by a percentage of the network before it goes live. And that's why it takes about a few days from the upgrade to the point where it's voted in.
Does the foundation or Inc. Leverage MIT's AI knowledge to enhance their protocols or products that they build?
Not at the moment. We probably should, but not at the moment. So We have some incredibly talented people who are both ex-MIT alumni, and of course Silvio himself. But right now, I don't believe there's any artificial intelligence involved in the day-to-day engineering. By the way, I think AI, is of course a very broad term. Deep learning, machine learning, neural networks, all of these technologies. Again, I think they're super cool. I think they will enable new classes of business. And I think we should, like anything, use them in a way that they make our lives better, so it's an interesting one. But I don't think, I know there's this perception that like generative AI, large language models, transformer models, which are, by the way, a very recent invention, like all of ChatGPT, all that kind of stuff is really built on a new type of neural network called a transformer model network, which came out of Google in the late kind of 2020s, 2019, I think, 2018, something around then. And so this is really new stuff, and it's replaced recurrent neural networks and convolutional neural networks as the kind of like the new cool kid in the block. But I don't think that this is going to erase the need for kids to go and learn about computing or become junior programmers. I think what will end up happening is it will expedite their learning, and they will probably work in a slightly different way. But I don't think that these technologies are going to erase jobs for young people, in my view.
I didn't realize that you used to work at a central bank. What are your thoughts about central banks issuing their CBDCs directly on chain versus creating their own silo that's their own protocol?
Yeah. So I worked in the Irish Central Bank, which is of course part of the European network of central banks, and the equivalent of the Fed in Europe is called the European Central Bank, and so the European Central Bank looks after the Euro system. And I also spent a little bit of time working with the team in the European Central Bank. I was part of the team that explored the Eurochain digital ledger technology at the time, and that was under Christine Lagarde. And I basically, myself and a team of about 20 engineers from various central banks in Europe worked together on this proof of concept Eurochain. So basically the very first kind of Eurocoin POC. Now I left, by the way, before they had completed anything on it, but I was part of looking at that, how it would work, what are the functional requirements, the non-functional requirements, what technology might you use to implement it at the time, looking at Ethereum, Hyperledger, and things like that. Looking at privacy, again, looking at Zcash and Monero as examples of privacy, and should there be privacy, and it was quite explorative. It wasn't, there was no mandate really other than explore this thing and play with it. So at that point, nothing too sinister there. I expect that any European level digital currency, my expectation would be that they wouldn't use a public blockchain. Even ones like Algorand or Ripple, which have a good reputation and are well run by smart guys and have good uptime, etc. I still don't think a European or a global institution would use a public chain. And the reason I say that is because I don't think that a central bank across Europe or any of these major areas would want to defer the control of the engineering to open source or to a third party. And so let's say they decided to choose Algorand, they would have to accept that the Inc. are responsible now for the engineering and the uptime and the security and all of these things of their European currency. I just don't think that a European central bank would want a public chain to have that responsibility.
But we are seeing this with smaller jurisdictions, right? Like Palau, for example, issued their not technically a CBDC because they don't have a central bank, but a government US dollar on the XRP ledger. There are these small cases that are starting to do that. My thoughts is, what happens when a bunch of small nations start issuing their CBDCs directly on chain, right? Now you have a kind of like this open public type of domain where people can build on top of that and create smart applications, shared liquidity, and then that's a hub for some of the larger jurisdictions to get into those areas. I mean, just with correspondent banking, right? There's a lot of different countries that are just cut off from the financial system. I mean, inclusion, just including everybody into the global economy. What will that do to our economy, right? It's probably going to add a lot of wealth that really isn't thought about too often. But I there's a lot of resources as well as labor and people that can contribute.
Yeah. No, it's a very good point. I mean, I don't know which way this is going to go. Of course, just my view, but my feeling is the larger central banks will want to have more control than maybe they might have if they issued on Algo or XRP or whatever. But at the same time, they then have the responsibility of running a whole decentralized network, which is a pain in the butt. I can tell you that. So.
Yeah, right. They have to hire everyone. They have to, and then it's getting out of their field, right? Their field is monetary policy. It's not technology, right? So now you have to either trust a technology firm to run everything for you, or you use something that's kind of been battle tested too, right? A lot of these crypto assets, they're holding billions of dollars in wealth. If somebody can exploit that, they make money from it, right? It's going to happen, and they're proving themselves slowly and surely. But another question I had was about bridging. Just do you think it's a flawed design? Are there different models out there that you think work better than bridging? There's been a lot of hacks that have happened over the years.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting. Of course, bridging, loosely is the idea, generally speaking, that you will have cross communication between chains, chain A and chain B, and then be able to move assets from chain A to chain B. And so how that's usually done is that you lock assets on one chain and then you emit them on the other chain. And these guys stay locked on their original chain, so they literally cannot be used. They're out of circulation until the assets that you emitted on the second chain are burned and they don't exist, and then you release these assets over here. And that's roughly how bridging tends to work. And so the complicated bit is not locking or emitting or burning and then releasing. That's not the complicated bit. The complicated bit tends to be, how do you do that in a trustless way? How do you tell chain B that chain A has done what it says it's going to do? How can these two chains trust that these events have taken place on both sides? And so the way most bridges work, like Wormhole or the large bridges that are out there, tends to be that you have some kind of validation layer in between, where humans will run software, or they will have some kind of protocol where they are watching both chains and they are attesting to the events that took place on either chain. And so this model works reasonably well. The problem, though, is that you're still trusting these kind of guardian networks or these relay networks in the middle to kind of validate the events that have taken place. And so I think we can do better. I've looked across a lot of bridging technologies, from IBC to state proofs, which is Algorand's technology, to things like Mithril on Cardano. To there's many different takes on this thing, but there's kind of, I think the evolution of it has to be away from these kind of guardian networks, which are effectively still fallible because it's still humans that are kind of day to day running them, and move to a kind of a trustless system where we're mathematically bridging things, so that the attestation that these events have taken place on chain A and chain B are done by the mathematics. So on Algorand, as an example, we have this cool tech called state proofs, and it's like, on paper, it's gorgeous. It uses every cool technique under the sun. It's got like post-quantum cryptography in it. It's got really cool math in it. It's very succinct. The whole thing is just super cool. And what it really is like, we issued this little blob of data. It's about 4 megabytes or so. Every 256 blocks, so every kind of 15 minutes or so, we'll issue this little bit of data. And what the data does, it's able to attest or prove to the entire state of the blockchain with this kind of little blob of data. And so that can be relayed over to the destination chain where you're trying to bridge your assets. And that destination chain doesn't have to trust you. It doesn't have to trust what it can do is it can just take the data that it just got, and it can validate for itself completely trustlessly using mathematics with a high degree of certainty that the event that occurred on the source chain did actually occur. And so this is super cool stuff. So in general, I mean, that's a bit of a plug for state proofs because I think they're cool, but in general, there's lots of different ways to do this. What I think we're failing to do is twofold. Number one, we have this issue where a lot of people use centralized exchanges to bridge. So if I want to bridge my my asset on Ethereum, like my USDC on Ethereum over to Algorand, it's easier for me to just send that USDC to Binance and then sell it into USDC algo and then withdraw it. And so a lot of people just use centralized exchanges as ways to swap and ways to bridge currencies. And so that's fine whilst they're there. It's fine whilst they're up and running. But if we have some very traumatic event in the industry, all of a sudden, maybe some of those exchanges will close. And so then having trustless bridges or having decentralized bridges becomes very important. The second thing, and this is maybe more critical, is that everyone is trying to do their own thing. And it's like that XKCD comic. I don't know whether you've seen that one, you know, hey, dude, there are like 25 competing standards. That's rubbish. You know, we'll have to, let's start a new one. Like, you know, we need to make a new one. And now there are 26 competing standards, you know. So we don't have a standard with which everyone has agreed to bridge things. And so wouldn't it be great if everyone could sit down, everyone in the top 50 and as an example, and just kind of say, okay, I don't love this one that we've all agreed on, but it's good enough that it checks the boxes for everyone. We all agree on some requirements, which are like, it has to be trustless, has to be safe, has to be well vetted, whatever. And then just all implement it. And then we'll have this like cross-chain utopia that we all dream of. And so I would even be willing to say, okay, we won't use state proofs, despite the fact that it's probably the best. I'll use this lesser one, but you know, at least we can all agree. And agreeing on a technology, whether it's layer 0, IBC, state proofs, Mithril, whatever, agreeing that we would all use a single standard, I think is probably the biggest thing holding back bridging.
Thanks. I appreciate that answer. It's really in depth. I appreciate that because you know, just the layer 0 type of architecture, like a Polkadot or the side chains and everything seems to be going the best from a user experience for me anyway. To bridge,
Sure.
bridge my asset to other chains through horizontal scaling.
Yeah.
So I know we're running out of time, so I wanted to ask you two more questions. One being there was an Oracle boom, there was a DeFi boom, there's an NFT boom, there's these different cycles that happen with specific technologies that are really important and critical. Is there any technology that you think is really critical right now that is going unnoticed?
Yes, I think post-quantum investigation into post-quantum technologies, I think, is really critical. And so we're seeing breakneck changes in terms of the evolution of post-quantum, quantum computers and the ability to run Shor's algorithm and factor the discrete log and effectively attack traditional cryptocurrency, elliptic curve crypto. And so we really need to double down on, and if you look at NIST, the American Institute for Standards and Tech, very well respected, probably NSA run, but very well respected, global institute. They've already said, look, we need to finalize these cryptographic choices for post-quantum. They've selected a technology called Falcon. We've actually implemented it in the state proofs I just talked about. So, you know, the state proofs are it's made Algorand's history of the chain quantum secure, but we still need to worry about the accounts. How are they going to be quantum secure? And indeed, the consensus algorithm for the chain. And this applies to other chains as well, including XRP. And so I think we should all start focusing on that. I think it's important.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. Is there anything that we didn't get to that you think we should have addressed?
I don't think so. It's been a really good discussion. I'm trying to think. I think we've hit all of the high points, really.
Yeah, the time flies, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's good.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on the show. How do we find more about the Algorand Foundation, and how do we find you on Twitter?
Absolutely. Listen, thank you ever so much for having me and helping me spread the message. And by the way, one last thing I would just say is that every blockchain out there that's doing their best to push forward the state of these decentralized asset classes is worth it. And so my one hope is that we reduce the tribalism. I know your channel generally focuses on XRP, and there's been tons of wonderful amounts of engineering put into that product, and it's taken very seriously, and it has a huge market cap. And look, there's lots of nonsense out there and lots of noise. There's no doubt, lots of meme coins and lots of chains that are absolute crap. But in general, there's lots of great projects, and we should try to, as a community, be less. And I don't mean XRP and ALGO, but just generally, broadly, we should all try to get along a little bit better. If for folks who want to maybe learn a little bit more about Algorand, and why we think it's a pretty great competitor to things like Ethereum as a programmable blockchain, you can check out algorand.foundation for the foundation, and you can check out algorand.com for the main cryptocurrency. But really, if you want to talk about things, just hit me up on Twitter. My Twitter handle, which sounded good in 2009 when I opened it, doesn't sound so good now, is @John Allen Woods. That's JOHN ALAN and then Woods, like the forest. Hit me up there and I'll answer all your questions.
Thanks, John. I appreciate you coming on.